Welcome to my talk. Developers use Bitbucket, and so can you. I can tell you now, you made a very good choice. This is going to be a great presentation. You're going to walk out of here super excited. You probably won't even want to go see anything else because you're going to get on Bitbucket immediately and start doing your thing. It's going to be that good, I promise you. So as you can see, we actually have a huge agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and just get right on in and get started, if that's cool with everybody. As Kelvin mentioned, I am actually a product manager for Bitbucket here at Atlassian, but funny enough, I actually have not always been a product manager. In fact, when I first started at Atlassian about 2.5 years ago, I was a marketing growth analyst for Bitbucket. And when I first came on board as that role, I'll never forget, it was probably my first or second week maybe, and I was in my one-on-one with my boss, and all of a sudden he starts sending me these links, these Bitbucket links. I'm like, why? Why in the hell would you send me Bitbucket links? I'm an analyst. I don't use Bitbucket, right? And then he goes on to explain that, oh yeah, marketing team, we always use Bitbucket. I start to panic. I mean, I'm sweating. I'm already thinking, how do I get my old job back? Because I was pretty convinced I was about to get fired. It was truly that bad. But luckily, he calmed me down. It wasn't a big deal. And within that same meeting, in under 30 minutes, he was able to teach me the basics of Bitbucket, get me set up, get me started. And I realized it's actually not that bad. And if you're not a developer, it doesn't matter. It is truly very easy to use. And no matter what role you are in, you do have a use case. I promise you, there is some use case for it. And as my time progressed at Atlassian, I realized as much as I wanted to be a part of the special, marketing team that were non-developers using Bitbucket, we were actually not the only special team. In fact, there were tons of special teams at Atlassian that were finding weird ways and different ways to use Bitbucket to actually make them work quicker and to make them work a ton faster. For example, maybe some of you can relate to this one, where you're working with public relations or someone that's doing content. I know several of you went to the keynote yesterday, and if you noticed, Scott had a ton of big numbers that would pop up on the screen. I guarantee you, none of those numbers were allowed to be posted unless they went through a series of reviews from our legal department. And all of those sign-offs, all of those approvals can be captured in Bitbucket, and more than likely were. Or maybe you're like many of our customer teams, right, that work with very confidential data, or our accounting and finance teams, right, where there is certain data that as much as you trust your company, you do not want every single little thing being shared with every person in the company. And in that regard, we tend to use Bitbucket as a way to actually share these private documents and make sure that only those people that need to know actually do know. Finally, maybe you're like our analytics groups, or you're just someone, a product manager, or someone that likes to pull their own data. A great way to share those queries, to even capture those queries, is in Bitbucket. One thing that you will always see at Atlassian on every single Confluence blog, or when an analysis goes out, there is a link at the bottom of it that says, hey, if you want to know where my data is, or how I pulled that data, or if I just want to know what I did 5 years ago when I actually did this analysis, go click on this link and you can actually see all of it, and it's captured. Okay. Or you're like our marketing team. Our marketing team, big advocates for different types of content. Or you're a technical writer where you're having to put different types of technical documentation. And as I'm sure you know, if you're one of these people, it is never just one person that writes something down and then all of a sudden it gets published, right? It's typically a series of reviews. There's a ton of people that get involved, and there's actually a lot of feedback loops. We actually do all of that feedback in Bitbucket. Another big one are designers, and designers love Bitbucket. A big piece of Bitbucket is our diff-views, being able to see things side by side, being able to see different pictures morph from the old to the new one so that you can actually tell what got changed. All of that easily captured in Bitbucket. But whatever your use case is, whether you're just someone that just wants to learn a little bit more about it, or you are someone that works with development teams and you just want to know how development teams use it, or you're someone that, like I said, works in many of those other departments that I just named, Bitbucket can be used. And hopefully throughout the course of this presentation, you're going to actually realize that, hey, I have a use case that Amber didn't even mention. And if that's the case, please come on over and talk to me, because I would like to talk to you more about it. So, the big thing about Bitbucket is version control. And I know a lot of you right now are probably thinking the big question, it's the question I always get when I tend to talk about this to other teams is, well, Amber, why not use the other Atlassian products, right? You have Confluence that you can, do feedback and stuff on. You have Jira, right, for approvals. But throughout the course of this presentation and the examples that I'm going to give, you're actually going to see that, one, Atlassian products are not made to be substitutes for each other. They're not, and I'm not trying to make Bitbucket a substitute. They're complements. They are complementary products. And when you use them all together, you will find that what you thought you may have had, like this great, super fast workflow, you will be even faster when you start using Bitbucket. The other one, and I probably shouldn't say this because there's probably several Atlassians in here that love Confluence and Jira and support those products. I can see a few. But honestly, there are features in Bitbucket that Jira and Confluence, some of the others, wish they had. They wish they could do some of the things that Bitbucket could. And that's why I'm going to be pushing it today. So version control. That is the foundation. That is the heart of Bitbucket. That is what it is built on. Ultimately, that's what it does. Obviously, there's a lot of other really cool things in it that we're going to talk about. But at its very base, at its very core, is version control. How many people know who these guys are? Everybody? All right, so if any of you have ever played the games, these are Mario and Luigi, for those of you that didn't. That came from those old school Super Nintendo or just Nintendo games way back in the day. And if you played those games, then you remember how horrible it was to actually save the game. You would have to go through several stages, right? And then you would finally get to save. Or if, I don't know, your brother or sister started playing the game and saved and screwed up your work, well, you were screwed, right? There was no going back. You could never revert, right? Nowadays, with video games, they've come a long way. You can save whenever you want. You can revert changes. So many different things that you can do now with video games. The reason I say it is because in that world, version control has come a long way. Yet, in our own world and how we actually use version control, we haven't been that great. In fact, many of you can probably relate to a lot of these instances where maybe you're working on a document and you start doing your thing and it's all good and you're halfway through and then you realize, oh man, everything I just did should not have done. And you know what you do at that moment? You start frantically clicking that undo button. And then what happens? The worst thing. That undo button goes gray. And you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I just ruined the original file. I can't get back to it. What do I do? Or maybe you're thinking, oh no, Amber, I don't run into that problem. Obviously, I just press save as at the beginning of every single file I open. And every time that I click save as, that gives me a backup, right? But then what ends up happening is you end up with this folder that has all these different files that have pretty much the same content. And then it gets so big that you actually have no idea which one is the latest one, which one was sent to who. Next thing you know, you're having to look through old emails when someone asked you about a file because you don't know which one they're actually referring to. Or you're having to look through your hip chat messages maybe. But either way, the way that we use version control in our daily lives isn't always the best, right? So, all that being said, since we know that version control is a problem, and obviously this isn't just a problem with us, it's been a problem for a lot of teams, we had Git that beautifully swept into the picture. And what Git did was it said, hey, we're going to create a beautiful version control tool, and in this tool, we're going to do the number one thing, which is we're going to make it flexible, and we're going to allow teams to work on the same projects, same files, all at the same time, no matter where they are, right? And that's what Bitbucket tries to harness. The benefits of Git actually are pretty far-reaching. So one, it removes the fear. No more having to worry that that undo button that you're frantically clicking is going to go gray, right? Almost anything and everything can be reverted, almost all of it. It also beautifully encourages innovation, which is incredible. Through the method of branching, which we'll talk more about later, you can actually say, I just want to make a copy of this file for now. I want to play around with that file, and then if I decide, you know what, I like the changes that I made, I can then actually merge those changes to the original and keep them. Then it also tracks progress, which is awesome. You can find out who did what when they did it. If they left a comment, you can find out why they did it. All of that is captured. And the reason or how it's able to do that is through snapshots. So Git is extremely fast and extremely powerful because it doesn't save a new file every time you make a change. What it's doing is it's actually just taking a snapshot of the changes you made. So every little commit, every little save, all it is a snapshot of those changes. That being said, because it's just a snapshot, not everything can be saved with Git. For example, this keynote would be a horrible thing to try and put version control on because there's so many formatting things. A single snapshot trying to capture every animation, every color, all the different pictures would be very difficult to do. But I've seen Excel sheets being captured, Word documents, tons of different things, different types of graphical files. But the best way to know if Git's going to work for you, throw a file in there, make a change to it, and check it out. I guarantee you 90% of the time, Git's going to be the solution for you, I promise. At this moment, or I guess the thing that I always get asked is, all right, well, Amber, if Git is always doing all the work, right, then why Bitbucket, right? Why do you need Bitbucket? Because it sounds like Git's the big thing, right? And you don't need Bitbucket to use Git, right? Well, I can tell you, 6 million people love Bitbucket. And it's not just because, Bitbucket uses Git. In fact, there are a ton of reasons why people love Bitbucket. Especially, I know many of you are server folks, but for those of you that do like cloud, it's accessible. If your computer goes up in flames, it doesn't matter. All you need is a computer connection or an internet connection and a computer, doesn't matter whose computer, sign in and you can access your files. It's also extremely secure. I talked a little bit about it earlier, but all the different types of permissions that you can add, all the different types of privacy that you can ensure that any data that you put in there, any type of file you put in there is going to be safe. And whoever you want to view it will be able to view it, and nobody else. The other thing is it's an Atlassian product. The integrations are extremely tight with our own products. What you can do with Jira, being able to see Jira issues in Bitbucket is incredible. But you know what? That's not it. You don't have to use Atlassian products. Maybe you don't use HipChat and you don't want to use that integration. You use Slack. Guess what? There's an integration for it. So our integrations are extremely good with Bitbucket, so you can always go and check those out. And then the fourth really, really big one, which I'm not going to tell you now because I like to be a little bit suspenseful with my talks, I'll get to later, but it's a good one. I can definitely say that. So how does it all get done? Get done. Get it? Oh, get it. I found that funny. Anyway, in 3 easy steps, you can easily get started. I will note that I'm going to talk about more Bitbucket Cloud here, but it really doesn't matter. Every single thing that I'm going to show in this presentation may be screenshots of Bitbucket Cloud, but it almost looks the exact same way in Bitbucket Server. I mean, the colors may be different, maybe the location of where the button is, maybe a tad bit, off to the right in one, but don't worry, the flows are the same, features the same, all of that. So first you're going to start by installing Git. Go to Google, search Git, it's going to pop up immediately. Follow the directions, in under 30 seconds, get Git on your computer, and you're done. Forget about it. You don't ever have to worry about it again. Next, if you're doing cloud, quickly sign up for it. It takes you 5 seconds on bitbucket.org, or talk to your admin, or go to Atlassian.com and get Bitbucket Server if you're a server person. Then, get SourceTree. I cannot say that enough. And I'm not trying to push another product, because guess what? SourceTree is 100% free. Doesn't matter if you have 50 million people that are touching on SourceTree, guess what? It is all zero, absolutely zero. So why SourceTree? And this is personally why I like SourceTree. It is extremely, extremely simple to use. You don't have to know Git commands. You don't have to know all that technical material. It's just all there, ready for you to go. It also makes it almost impossible for you to screw anything up, right? I mean, you get alerts telling you, hey, this file has been changed. Maybe you should do this. Or, hey, add a comment and then save it. All of it is there, making it almost impossible to screw anything up. Then, it doesn't even matter if you're a beginner. We have experts that absolutely love love source tree. And the main reason is it's one beautiful screen, one solid screen where you can see it all. You know how many different types of commands would have to happen for you to see all of this on one screen in terminal? It probably couldn't be done. You'd be scrolling constantly and typing constantly to get it. Whereas in source tree, there it is, one screen. So it's super easy. You put it locally on your desktop, little app, and it does all the work for you. So 3 easy steps, we can get it all done. And then all you have to do is a very simple process, which is just add a file. And this may seem a little bit more complicated, but I promise you it's not. It really isn't. All we have to do is create a folder in Bitbucket called a repository, make sure that we put that folder or make a copy of it and add it to our computer. And then after we do that, we just have to add a file to that folder. And then if we change that file, we save it, and then we make sure we save it to Bitbucket. That's it. So it sounds super easy. I promise you, it definitely is. And to prove it, we can actually walk through it. So regardless if you're using Bitbucket Server or Bitbucket Cloud, you will see both very similar screens. At the moment that you get on it, it's going to say, hey, create a repository, which again, fancy word for just create a folder, right? That's all it's asking you to do. So create that folder. And in this example, you'll actually see where I created my fake repository, my Summit Materials folder that I created quickly online. And then the moment I pressed, hey, I want that folder, this pops up. And it says, do you want to clone this repository? And all it's asking you is, do you want to put this folder on your computer? Do you want a copy of this repository on your desktop or wherever you choose to save it? And so easiest thing to do, click the button that says clone in source tree. And the moment you do, what's going to happen is source tree will magically pop up, and it's going to say, hey, Amber, this looks awesome. Where do you want to save this folder? And in this case, you'll actually see where I decided to save my Summit Materials folder straight to my desktop. That easy. And then when I went to my desktop, bam, there it is. That folder that I had actually made in Bitbucket. If I were to add any file, which I did, I added a text file to that folder. I just dragged and dropped it. That was my how-to test folder. You'll notice that in source tree, remember how I said it pretty much guides you through everything? All of a sudden, in source tree, file pops up, and it says, hey, you've done something new to this folder, right? And by telling us that, we know, okay, we can make several, we can just leave it alone, leave it as is, or we can say, you know what, we want to make that snapshot. Remember how we talked about how Git is just a series of snapshots? Well, that is. And so to make that snapshot and to say these are the changes we want to save, commit. So commit, just another word for us saying we're confident, right? We're confident in these changes. We like what we've done. Let's go ahead and save them. And you can add a comment. This is why I made this change, or this is why I added this file, right? And you can always reference that. Even if it's 20 years later, you can come back and be like, oh, that was why I changed it. Or if you're sharing this with somebody else, you can see the reason why maybe somebody else changed a file. But when you press commit on source tree, what you're doing is you are saving that to your computer. You haven't yet told Bitbucket that you have made a change, right? So in order to tell Bitbucket, hey, I added a file, I made a change to it, here's my reasoning, you have to make one more step, and that's called a push. And basically, you push those changes to the cloud or to your server instance, and it just says, hey, Bitbucket, I want you to keep track of this. I want you to keep track of it this way. If something were to happen to my computer, everything's going to be okay, because now it's all being tracked in Bitbucket. And the moment you go to Bitbucket, whether it be server or cloud, all of a sudden you'll see that file pop up in a folder. You'll see my Summit Materials folder and my how-to document. That simple, that easy, that quick. So, probably wondering, all right, Amber, version control sounds great. I mean, so does Bitbucket, maybe, but you're still not 100% convinced, right? So, remember how I mentioned earlier that I had that really cool thing to talk about? Well, as you all notice, if you have used Atlassian products, which I'm sure you have, the one thing that makes Bitbucket truly, truly amazing and why those 6 million people use it, it's the collaboration of it. What you can do with Bitbucket is a collaboration type feature with all those files that we've just added, right? So what happens when you add a file or you make a change to that how-to document that I just showed you, and maybe you need feedback on it? Guess what? All that feedback can easily happen all in Bitbucket. So the way it gets done. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but you can branch things, and this is what allows people to truly innovate. So let's say I don't know, on a wild whim, I decide I think the Bitbucket logo should no longer be blue, and I want to make it pink. Now, I know everybody is probably not going to be on board with that idea on my team, so I can easily branch, right? And branching is just, I'm going to make a copy of that folder, or I'm going to make a copy of that file. I'm going to change it to pink. And then, if I think that, you know what, my changes are awesome, and I love that Bitbucket is pink now, I can then easily merge it back to that original file and say that now the master file, it's a pink Bitbucket. But what if I'm not too sure, right? And I'm like, you know what, that's a pretty big decision to make the Bitbucket logo pink, and I probably cannot do that on my own. I probably need other people to sign off on this. The best way for me to do that is through the power of peer review. So peer review in Bitbucket is truly spectacular. This is what makes people's workflow truly efficient. Through the power of a pull request, which all it's saying is, hey, I made this change. I'm going to tell these specific people I made this change, and I want those people to give me feedback on it. And I want those people to then approve it, right? So then once that happens and then I get that approval, then I can merge it. And then I can make it the master. And then that helps me be able to, again, be innovative, try things out, but then be able to get that feedback and then make sure that whatever changes I finally decide to go with, you know what, that everybody has approved them and that we're all on board. So, I'm sure you've all used the apps for this Atlassian Summit, but you'll notice that there was a summary on my talk. And great example would be that summary was actually collaborated on via Bitbucket, right? In fact, Kelvin, who's sitting right here, you'll notice he's given me some feedback that wasn't that great on the summary that I provided. But this is what a pull request looks like. So all I did was I added my file to my Summit repository, to my Summit folder, and I said, hey, I'm going to open up a pull request. I'm going to seek that peer review. I'm going to seek those comments, and I'm going to open up this. And what happens on the screen, you'll notice, are multiple things. So one, commenting, which is incredible. So Kelvin's comment there. You can also see where he assigned me a task, saying, Amber, you should probably change this because it sounds absolutely horrible. He then can watch it if he wanted to watch it. So this way, if I reply or if I actually finish that task, he'll be alerted. And then you can actually see who I named as reviewers on this. And you can see where Sven, at the point, had actually reviewed it, yet Kelvin still decided not to. He did eventually approve it, I promise. But all of that stuff on one great screen. So we have covered a ton of stuff in a very short amount of time. We've talked about Git, how it is basically just a basic, awesome version control system that allows multiple people to work on the same stuff. It allows you to be innovative through branching. It allows you to be comfortable when you merge. And then we talked about what makes Bitbucket special, right? And what makes Bitbucket special is all of those peer review things, right? Being able to say, hey, I made these changes to these files, and I need your approval before I go ahead with it, right? So, now that we've talked about this, and I'm sure you are all super on board and you cannot wait to start using it, if you're still not 100% convinced, maybe the next few examples definitely will. So this happened recently. This is no joke. This really happened, where we were looking at just kind of the Bitbucket flow, and as you notice, as I'm sure you have signed up for many things before on the internet, you always get a welcome email or a sign-up email. Bitbucket didn't have one. Years. And we did not have a welcome email that just said, hey, you signed up for Bitbucket, great, right? We're like, we should probably do that, right? So we decided, all right, let's do the Bitbucket welcome email. That required a lot of teams, a ton of teams, because you can't just make that easy change. We needed the marketing team to help us with content. We needed the design teams to help us with the different graphics that are in it and the layout. We needed the engineering team to actually implement how this email gets triggered. We needed the growth team to help us with all other stuff. And you know what happens when you need that many teams? This, which is just a gigantic mess. You end up with like 50 Confluence pages, I don't know how many Jira tickets, and everything is scattered. Maybe some random file folder somewhere, you don't know. But every team is operating somewhere else. There's not one cohesive spot, right, to track all of this. In this case, Bitbucket was used. So like I said, we had engineering that housed their code in Bitbucket. That's what they used it for. We actually had our growth team. So all the tags that were placed on the links in that email were easily saved to Bitbucket. Marketing was able to finalize their content through the power of different types of diff-views. And you'll see where this is actually one of the coolest parts of the pull request that I showed you earlier, that peer review form, is you see the comments. Remember I showed you Kelvin's comment. But here you can actually see where Justine and Claire were going back and forth saying, hey, can you make these changes? And then you'll notice that when those changes got made, it updates and it shows you specifically what was changed with the green and the red. And if that's not enough for you, you can take it even one step further and do a side-by-side diff, right? And with that side-by-side diff, you can just see how the first original file eventually morphed into the new one. So diffs are a very powerful way for you to easily see what was changed and what wasn't changed. So how does design use it, right? I mean, design is using a completely different type of format. They're using pictures. They're not using text like we've seen in all of these other examples, right? Design teams love Bitbucket. So I showed you the diff-views just a second ago, but we have very similar diff-views, right, for graphics. And what you can see here is, okay, here's just the original file that was added, basic picture. This is the actual picture that is on the Bitbucket email. You can go sign up and check it out. And you can see Liam says we should probably change a few things about this picture. And when they change it, you see that immediate, here's the old picture, here's the new one. That's the diff view. But if you want to take it a little bit further, you can do what's called blending, which is pretty darn neat. I'm hoping this is showing great on there, but you can actually see the backgrounds changing and the coffee cup changing. Sometimes changes can be so small and so minuscule that you actually don't know, right, what's being changed. With views like this, you can. And if that's not enough, you can actually do what's called a split view. Ooh, there we go. And the split view also allows you to quickly go back and forth between the two different images, right? So diff views are extremely, extremely powerful in Bitbucket, and those all come on that pull request form. So we had all these teams that were talking amongst each other, working on it. What we ended up with, we had 2 Confluence pages that talked about the decisions that were made, why we were doing it, our DAISY, right? All of which had links to this repository, which has everything. It has the code that our engineers used. It has the final graphics that our designers chose. It has the content for the email that marketing collaborated on, right? And it has all of our growth tags that were used in one spot. Not a bunch of random folders floating around somewhere, all in one location. This way, guess what? I mean, if we decide that we want to change it, if I think that welcome email blows and we need to fix it, all I have to do is go here and make those changes and see everything that's involved, right? I don't have to go hunt down every single team and figure out where did they save all of their files. It's here. So that's one example of how a lot of teams use it in that particular case, and I focus a lot on diff views, but there are other different reasons. Our analysts and different data people have used Bitbucket as a great way to track basically just our queries. As you all know, I mean, data changes constantly, products change constantly. So having that one source that people can reference is imperative for Atlassian. Because if I were to just send something to someone and say, hey, you know, what about this change? Or did you track this change, right? Did you know that we changed this? They may say, no, I didn't know that, right? Or maybe I didn't even know they were using it, so I didn't know to tell them that, hey, I changed this query, right? So what we do is we actually keep all of our queries, any type of database change like that, all of our data analytics queries are housed in one spot. This way you always know if something has changed, that query has also changed, and we have updated that file. So you are always using the most up-to-date information. In this particular example, we have a great feature. I love it. It's kind of an interesting name for it, called the blame feature. So, since you can share files and we can all look at them, and if you have editing rights, you can make changes. Let's say a month from now, I notice a change gets made to my file. And I'm like, why? Who changed it? What did they do? When did they do it, right? You can actually click the blame button and blame them, which is awesome. So when you click blame, there we go, you will actually see on the side panel who did what and when. Even better, you'll notice that there's an ID there. That ID is the ID of the snapshot, or the ID of the commit that happened, of that change that got made. And when you click that ID, you'll actually get the comment that was made from when the change was made, saying, Amber, our database changed. This is why we did it. Don't freak out. It's okay, right? And again, 5 years from now, when we're wondering, why did we do all this? All of that information will still be there for us to easily track it. We also do this for protecting our fragile information. I mentioned before that our customer teams, even certain financial teams, that we use Bitbucket as a way of being able to share certain things when we have to. A great example of this is actually notifications. So sometimes there's a very important product update. Maybe it's something on, great example, last year, if any of you got the notifications of Stash becoming Bitbucket server, right? In that particular case, we had to alert people. We weren't just going to change it and not tell you, right? So people had to be alerted. Bitbucket keeps our data extremely close to our hearts, and only a very limited amount of people have access to customer information, right? Very, very, very few people have access. So in that particular case, the email team needed to get access to those emails so we could alert our customers. Email team doesn't have access. So my boss, Rahul, ends up creating a folder, right? He creates a repository, and he puts very strict permissions on it, saying there's only one person that is allowed to read it, right? And there's only one person that's allowed to write to it, and that was me. And so what we ended up doing is we created that folder, and then I was able to easily add those lists there and share them with the customer team. The other part of this particular use case was we had to track it. Because it is customer information, because it is emails, there is a JIRA ticket involved, right? With Bitbucket, if you set it up, it's super easy to do, just add the link to it. When you're making a change and you're adding that comment to, hey, this is why I made this change, if you add the JIRA ticket number, Bitbucket will recognize it. And you'll see where it appears here in my comment. But then, if I actually go to my commits or those screenshots, you'll see where that ticket is now there. And it kills me that I do not have a screenshot of this because we just released it. But now, originally, when you clicked on that, it would take you all the way to JIRA. But now what happens is you actually get this really pretty pop-up in your browser that will say, hey, here's all the basics of that JIRA ticket. Here's what you need to know. Here's all the quick information. Here's the rundown. And then if you want to go to JIRA from there, you can click on it again and it will take you to JIRA. So these integrations are extremely tight. If you haven't been able to tell, Bitbucket has a ton of features, all the things, right? I didn't even touch on all of them. Believe me, there are so many more. I just touched on a few big ones that we use. But hopefully you've been able to see that, you know what? There are other teams that can use Bitbucket. And guess what? Bitbucket's not scary, right? It's actually really, really, really easy. I think people just like to make it look hard, but it's not. It truly isn't. So please, go check it out. Check out SourceTree. Think about it. Talk about it with your teams, and really try and find cases to where maybe you can use it to maybe streamline your processes, make everything a little bit more efficient. Track your projects, track your files, put everything in one central place. I mean, most of your companies are probably already using this product. Take advantage of it. It is a great tool. Be able to talk to your software teams or software developers that you see every day and be able to know what it is they are working on. It's a great tool to use. It truly is. And I hope you feel that way too.